They were the heroes from the future, teenagers protecting the universe from those that would sow the seeds of chaos. Each had unique powers and abilities, and though they often had their differences, they came together to save the day as the Legion of Superheroes. Now, you can be a part of their adventures and learn the history of the future in the Legion Clubhouse.
Is Supergirl written as the tee-hee, I'm dumb, I don't want to piss off Superman throughout all of her books, or just this Jerry Siegel story?
Supergirl at this point is supposed to be 15 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And while she's not always quite this ditzy, she is very much a 50s teenager.
Okay. Right.
At this point in her history.
Okay.
Action Comics number 267, The Three Superheroes. Published August 1960. Written by Jerry Siegel, with art by Jim Mooney. The kids from the future return to once again prank a hero from their past, but Supergirl has a few surprises of her own.
You want to know how I think of Supergirl when she's talking, when she sees these kids running around town?
Tell us.
There's this panel, and you kind of read it as, the nice little 15-year-old girl. I see the Linda Lee robot emerging from a hollow tree in another wooded lot. Something's cuckoo. I'll investigate. As Supergirl.
So you think she does the big radio change to her voice?
Yes.
She talks like this, and then suddenly, I'm Supergirl. That's pretty cool.
I mean, it would make sense, right? I mean, for her to change her voice, but I'm being a little bit more extreme, like the radio Superman was, where he was just timid Clark Kent, and then suddenly he drops his voice 20 octaves. Yeah, Bud Collyer drops his voice like 20 octaves. I'll be Superman. So here's another question that I have. Does Jerry Siegel, we kind of talked about this in the last episode, does Jerry Siegel just have a total hate for anything Otto Bender ever created? Because as we read this story, this is an exact ripoff of Adventure Comics 247. Instead of three superhero teenagers arriving from the future to tease Superboy and invite him into their club, three teenagers arrive from the future to terrorize Supergirl, then take her to the future, where we have almost the exact same shots, panel for panel, including the visit to the ice cream parlor with 9 flavors from 9 planets.
Well, there are a couple of things that we need to remember at this point. Action 267 is from August of 1960.
Yes.
Adventure 247 is from April of 1958. This is a Mort Weisinger edited comic. Mort Weisinger had a famous theory that stated that his entire audience aged out and changed about every 2 to 3 years.
I can see that.
So they may have actually been given specific instructions to do that Legion thing again. To go through the story. But
so you think after 2 appearances and 2 years later, I mean, there's been a lot of, in between that, there's been a lot of single panel pop-ups and those kinds of things. You really think that it was time to retell this story featuring Supergirl, which is probably very popular among the young kids as opposed to Superman or Superboy?
Right. There are a couple of theories that I have about this. One is Weisinger is actually quite notorious for doing this over and over. Then there's also the thought process. When you look at what Jerry Siegel really loves to do, Jerry Siegel loves to put his stamp on things. And Jerry Siegel loves to come in and say, my guys are the best guys. Mm-hmm. Superman is the best because Superman is the best. And because he's the best, he is the best. I feel like this story could be either one of those things. I think what it really feels to me is, hey, let's go ahead and do that story again because it was popular the first time, and most of the kids are now out of the 6th grade, so we'll get a whole new bunch of kids. But if you look at what Siegel does, he puts a couple of little twists on it. Instead of mysterious teens who kind of hover around, we actually see the first 3 new recruits to the Legion in this issue.
Right. Now, that is something that I find very fascinating. But to me, this felt very much like, I'm Jerry Siegel, see? Forget that Bender guy. I'm going to crap all over it and make this my own. That's kind of what it felt like.
It's not a crap all over it thing, but I do agree with you in that it feels like Siegel putting his thumbprint on things.
It's not Siegel putting his thumbprint on all things. Oh, we are the children of the 3 young superheroes who befriended Superboy. We are carrying on the Legion tradition. So not only is this not the Legion members that Bender created, these are the descendants of those teenagers that Bender created.
Well, you want to know something really complicated.
Okay.
Here's the deal. The Legion of Superheroes came back to Superboy's time.
Right.
Which is explicitly 10 years before the time of Supergirl.
Right.
If these are the future children of the Legion, then the Legionnaires came back from the year 2958 to 1948, while the Legionnaires that we see here are the children who came from like 2968, but back to 1960. So these are not only Legionnaires who came back in time, they're in their time frame after the point where they should have met Superboy, but before the point where they did meet Superboy, except it's 10 years later. So technically it's both before and after.
Again, this is another example of I need to make this my own. And instead of just accepting that you can be the same age and travel to different points in time, we have to make it very complicated by saying, oh, no, we're the children of. So the big question is, as the Legion mythology grows and the continuity grows, does this stick around? Do we get to see Great Aunt Saturn Girl?
No. There is never another reference to that single panel. And later on, it is explicitly referenced by Saturn Girl, Lightning Lad, and Cosmic Boy, and later Brainiac 5 and other Legionnaires, that this happened, and that line is kind of just ignored. It's swept under the rug. It's early installment weirdness that it's not even something that's even retconned away. It's just that never happened.
Yeah. No,
that totally never happened.
I can totally see that. And until, again, comic books being a throwaway media, I can totally see nobody ever remembering this until you get to a podcast 50 years later and 2 guys are going, hey, wait a minute. This doesn't make any sense.
See? Yeah. That's one of the things that when you're reading these early Legion stories, and we'll get to this with the next Legion tale as well, they are not written with an expectation of continuity or an expectation that they're going to stick around.
Right. Now,
these are throwaway stories.
There are a couple of things that I did like in this story. First of all, we do get to find out some of the rules of being a member of the Legion of Superheroes. We've already learned that you have to have only one superpower. We learned that when Superboy was initiated.
You have to have one unique superpower.
Right, one unique superpower. We also find out that you have to be under 18 years of age in this story. And that's the only way that this Supergirl story will work, is for them to put in this rule of being under 18 years of age. And third, only one applicant a year is selected to join the Legion of Superheroes. So
that third one also gets ignored.
Right. But what I like is we are starting to get a rule set for how this group works.
Yeah. And importantly, the must be under 18 rule was in place until explicitly at least 1988, because when Polar Boy joined after years of being the leader of the Legion of Substitute Heroes, they explicitly reference they waived the under 18 rule so Polar Boy could join. And that was right after the Crisis on Infinite Earths in 1988. So
you also mentioned that we get to meet 3 new Legion of Superheroes, which again I think is really cool, that we get to see the party expand by 3 this time. And so we get to meet Chameleon Boy, who has super disguise as his power. We have Colossal Boy, who has super growth as his power. And then we have the Invisible Kid, who doesn't have invisibility as his power, but he has super invisibility. What the hell is super invisibility?
Well, you know how things are sometimes invisible?
Yeah.
Imagine super invisible. He's so invisible that invisible things look at him and go, man,
plus
that Lyle is invisible.
Plus he also gets to sneak up behind Supergirl and go peekaboo.
Boinky. Yeah, he probably goosed her. It's hard to say. It's 1958. He probably didn't goose her.
Well, so was there... I'm curious about how Supergirl is treated in this series, because she really comes off as a teehee, I don't want to do anything that'll make Superman mad at me. I'm just a girl.
Well, keep in mind, this is very early in Supergirl's career. Her first appearance is like Action Comics 252.
Supergirl created by Otto Bender, so also that.
Right. But Supergirl at this point is explicitly a young teen, and she's not just written as a young, dippy, flippy teenage girl, but a 50s teenage girl.
I find that, I mean, from my modern sensibilities, I find this quite troubling, because while Supergirl tries to dig a tunnel through the earth, and if you look at the panel, it looks like she's slicing off North America and sending it floating into space. When she comes out,
it's a future.
Maybe. And when she comes out, they will not let her join the Legion of Superheroes, because now she is older than 18. And when she looks in a mirror, she has in fact become a superwoman. And the only thing that she can think about is the fact that maybe she ran across some red kryptonite while she was digging that tunnel through the earth. And maybe someday it will wear off. But, oh, gee, I sure don't want to bother Superman for help, especially since he often warned me about red kryptonite, sob. And then 1 hour later, the effects wear off. And then she's left pondering, will I ever become a member of the Legion of Superheroes? I wonder.
Of course you will.
I don't know. It just, I know what you're saying about this being a 50s take on women. But man, this is, by today's standards, super offensive.
She is explicitly meant to be a child. And this is less than a year into her career. I mean, Supergirl has been around for 15 issues. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, they are still very much writing her. Keep in mind, I don't know if Action Comics number 267, for those listening at home, has a lead story where Lois Lane gets involved with Hercules and decides to use Hercules to make Superman jealous.
Right.
50 Superman comics are not
almost
exactly
as mean.
I don't want to say mean.
I'll say mean, because Superman's always like, now, Lana, you silly woman, why did you do that?
They're artifacts of another time.
They are.
What this is grown science fiction writers' idea of what a little girl would act like. And the fact that she's meant to be 14, 15, 16, in modern parlance, would expect that she would be a relatively sophisticated adolescent. At this point, that age is still basically a kid. Mm-hmm. She's a baby child, and she acts like a dippy little baby child, and she's a 50s female character in a comic, so she's doubly dippy. I can definitely see it being an issue. I feel like...
Well, I guess my question is, I haven't read a lot of 50s Supergirl, so my question was, is this a one-time thing, or did other writers treat her a little better? I just have this building thing in my head that Jerry Siegel was not the nicest person in the world. Now, I'm not saying that he wasn't. I'm just saying, in my mind, as I read through some of these issues and see what he's doing to what Bender had created, I'm like, I wouldn't put it past him.
Well, keep in mind, if you look at, let's say Action 252 was not written by Jerry Siegel. Jerry Siegel, and I'm not saying this is a direct quote, but I know that Jerry Siegel has experienced the sentiment that other characters are just knockoffs of his cool Superman character.
Right.
So I'm not 100% certain that that's what we're seeing here, or if he's trying to make sure that she is distinct from his cool Superman character by being a moony little goofy kind of, oops, I goofed. I broke North America, you guys. Tee-hee. But yeah, I can see your point. I think that really my attention is focused on the fact that Colossal Boy is dressed like Bucky Goldstein, the Jewish cowboy, which is such a wonderful, they should use his costume.
Why?
Because it's beautiful. It's a green tunic.
Right.
With a collar, a butterfly collar, yellow pants, a big spangly belt with a giant belt buckle, red boots, and red gloves with stars on them. He looks like he dressed in the dark. But
that's what happens in the future. You can dress in the dark. It's wonderful,
and it's perfect, and it looks so. And of course, it's got that the flared shoulder flangy things, whatever those
are. Also to point that out, Cosmic Boy also has those on his shoulder pads.
Yes, and
Chameleon Boy kind of does, but his are kind of like flared.
Yeah, he has pointy, and Invisible Kid has a massive 70s disco collar. But
a head of 70s disco collars.
Exactly, because they're from the future. They're doing retro.
The thing that's a little odd, though, when we get to meet these three heroes, is that they only get to show off their powers, and then they're never seen again in the issue. It's all, and again, if I'm going with my Jerry Siegel has to make everything his own, he's sitting in there. I'll show Bender. I'll add 3 new Legion of Superhero members, and they will be mine. All mine.
Okay, it's a 12-page tale.
I know.
And 4 of those pages are established with, a reprise of what happened in 247 and then coming into the future. But Invisible Kid and Chameleon Boy and Colossal Boy especially become very fundamental to the future of the Legion. We see a lot of them, and they become very important, very meaningful members in a long-term way.
Oh, sure they do. But I don't know. There's something that is just
even though he's dressed like Bucky Goldstein.
Just a little bit off kilter. The final thing that we learn that I think is important in this book is that Supergirl's costume stretches, which is a good thing.
Yes. Kryptonian fabric has infinite stretch, even though it's indestructible, because Supergirl, grew from a girl to a woman. She's like 10 inches taller and 15 years older, apparently. I don't know. It may just be me, but my word, does that skirt look short to you?
Oh, they always look short.
Well, I mean, Jim Mooney draws short skirts, but I mean, Supergirl's skirt looks like super. I said super. It looks as short as the short skirt that we see on the 2007 Infinite Crisis Supergirl.
I would say it's as short as what you would expect to see on cheerleaders today. Maybe just a hair longer, but about that short.
It almost looks like a puffy pinafore skirt.
Or puffy short pants or something.
Yeah, maybe like a skirt or what do they call those?
I don't know what they call them. Not really.
I think they call them culottes.
I don't think so.
But it looks very puffy and very short, and it doesn't quite balance out. And it does also, to me, emphasize the expectation that this is a childish, very immature juvenile. This is a child in play. She's wearing a little play skirt like you'd put on a child in the 50s and send her out to play on the playground.
If you enjoy the show, we would appreciate your support. You can find out more and become a Legion Clubhouse member at patreon.com/Major Spoilers. Adventure Comics number 282, Lana Lang and the Legion of Superheroes. Published March 1961. Written by Otto Binder with art by George Papp. A new Legionnaire arrives in Smallville. But is he after fleeing criminals or the hand of Lana Lang?
There's Clark Kent, my next-door neighbor, reading a book in his backyard. I'll print down the blindings. He might laugh if he glanced over and saw what a crush I have on Superboy. To me, Lana Lang sounds like she always talks like Nellie Olson.
Yes, and 50s Lana Lang is very much that. It's kind of the same thing that we discussed with Supergirl in the Action 267. Because she's meant to be a teenager, she's kind of immature and, he didn't even notice my nice new dress.
Yeah.
It's an extension of that Lois Lane, let's make Superman jealous thing. But without even the tiny bit of adult actual what's the word I'm looking for? Adult authority, I think, is the word that Lois has in her stories.
Okay. Do you ever sit and think about what the Legion characters sound like? Because to me, Saturn Girl always sounds like Anne Francis from Forbidden Planet.
Ooh.
And for some reason, Cosmic Boy kind of sounds like Fred McMurray.
I can see that. My Saturn Girl looks and sounds like a very young Elizabeth Montgomery. And then for Lightning Lad, I have kind of a Kirk Douglas thing going on.
Oh, really?
And then,
I can see that.
Cosmic Boy has just a normal voice. Welcome to the Legion of Superheroes. We are all from various worlds and possess some superpowers like you, Starboy. He's like the narrator.
Yeah. I can see that.
That perfect sort of... And then Quincy had to...
I just don't like how female characters are portrayed in these books.
These are a couple of very difficult ones. And again, Lana in the 50s is created specifically to be a teenage complication like Lois is to Superman.
Right.
But without even the agency of I have my own job and money and do these things and I'm a grown-up, Lana is very much a spoiled brat, especially in this issue. But
so just like Nellie Olson,
there's not a whole lot of great Lana stories in the 50s is what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, this is not one of her best because of the way she treats poor Starboy. I mean, it appears as you get later into it that she's the dom and he's the sub in the relationship. Because she's just bossing him around. Now, granted, she's basically saying, listen, you do what I say so I can make Superboy jealous, or else I'm going to give away your secret, Tom Kaylor.
I believe it's Kalor.
I'm going to say Kaylor. Or Kalor.
Why would you say Kalor?
Why not? Kallor.
Well, Kalor is Worf's girlfriend on Star Trek The Next Generation.
Well, see, even Otto Binder was planning things far, far in advance.
No.
So the cool thing that happens in this issue is we get introduced to yet another member of the Legion of Superheroes, a.k.a. Starboy.
Yes.
And he has all of the exact same powers as Superman, but a few bonus powers as well.
Yeah. He's actually more powerful than Superboy.
Is that how it remains in continuity?
It does not. And Starboy is one of those weird stories because this is Adventure Comics 282. Mm-hmm. Starboy disappears and does not return until Adventure Comics 316. And that is actually just a one-panel cameo drawing. By 317, Starboy has an entirely different set of powers. He has the ability to manipulate gravity and make things heavier.
So,
like a star.
Let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. Who wrote Adventure Comics 317 that you're referring to?
Edmund Hamilton.
Interesting, because I believe everyone is on a crap on Otto Binder bent. Because Otto Binder here creates Starboy, and then someone has to go and change him.
Well, the thing about this story is that at this point in time, the Legion is still just a recurring kind of a story thing. And in this issue, based on the membership in this issue, we know that it has to take place after Adventure 267 when Chameleon Boy joins.
Why is that? Oh, because there's a shot of him.
Boy appears.
Yeah, there's a shot of him in there, yes.
Yes. This story is weird because it feels like Siegel, when he started writing the Legion again here in a month or two, either didn't know about or didn't want to acknowledge what happened in this issue. And I'm going to go with maybe didn't know about because, again, Starboy is gone basically for the next 3 years. When he does reappear, he reappears under a completely separate author, practically a brand new character in a lot of ways. Here's the best story, though. The reason for his disappearance and the story, the explanation of his powers changing, doesn't get told in Adventure 317. Doesn't get told in Adventure 318. It gets told 25 years later in 1983 in an issue of Legion of Superheroes. It's a long wait to find out exactly what happened. But basically in this issue, we see Starboy fly through the tail of a comet in his father's spacemobile.
Like you do.
Well, yeah, and it ruins my joke of this is not your father's spacemobile. It is explicitly his father's spacemobile.
Right.
That gives him superpowers. But in any case, that temporary superpower wears off. And at that point in time, when he returns to the Legion in 317, he starts using his gravity powers and eventually switches to the black suit with the white star field that everybody knows him best in. And this story just kind of goes by the wayside and is never really explained away. But it feels like this is something that someone did as a cute one shot. And And then they brought back the Legion and went, oh, well, this is popular. We're going to make this a regular thing. And someone went, hey, guys, you remember that one shot we did 2 years ago? And they're all like, no.
No, we don't.
We don't know anything about planet Xanthu.
There's some weird things that go on in this issue beyond Lana trying to figure out a way to make Superboy jealous so that he will fall in love with her, of which Superboy does a complete Superman story on like we were talking about that Superman does to Lois all the time. Superboy does the exact same thing to Lana here. But there's a weird thing that happens. So Superboy has 3 weird encounters, 3 being a magical number apparently when it comes to the Legion of Superheroes.
3. It's a magic number.
He then goes and finds Starboy, who then says 2 Xanthu criminals have escaped. One is in the copper tubing in Xanthu. The other one stole a time ship. I pursued him here and locked him up in a cave. What's preventing that criminal from using that time ship? And more importantly, when they go back to the future, they don't take the time ship with them. There are some really cool dangling plot points in a lot of these Legion things, like the planet of Superboy, which I still have not gotten an answer from. I even asked Mark Waid and he didn't respond.
I believe I saw Mark Waid say that he didn't know of any other appearances of it.
But a time machine just hanging around Smallville, Kansas, that's a story that needs to be written.
And that's something else that I think that's part of the appeal of these early stories is they feel like fragmented bits of a bigger history. These things that we look at now in 2017 and say, well, this is clearly a continuity error, to a kid in 1961 didn't feel like a continuity error. It felt like, that's a story they never told us. What could have happened to that Superboy planet? Did that Xanthuan criminal use his time machine to go to Superboy planet? All of these bits and pieces are part, I think, of the fascination of early Legion. And one of the reasons why, when you see later Legion stories and revamps and relaunches and launch boots and vamp boots and boot launches, it's always the Legion from Adventure 350 and back. It's these early characters that people are revisiting. You never want, you don't see people who are just desperate to find out what happened to Dawnstar and Block, because their stories are told in a modern sensibility. These old stories, there's bits and pieces and missing chunks, and you can write whatever you want. And there's a thing in here that's half tiger, half parakeet. It's called a paracat.
And apparently can talk. Although what's weird is Superboy assumes that it's just repeating back what he hears, as opposed to, this is a sentient being, Superboy, and you just swung it around by its tail, and then you want to offer it up to the Queen of Xanthu as a gift.
Well, it is half parakeet. So he may assume that it's just, bark, Polly, what a cracker. Princess of Xanthu is beautiful. Bark.
Yeah. All right. I guess I'll go with that. But it seems to be, as it's written, a sentient being. How long do you think it takes to travel from Xanthu in the future to Smallville of the past?
15 minutes.
Okay, because I was a little concerned that Superboy sealed Lana Lang in a piece of glass. So she's only in there with the air that's in there. And if the trip is longer than maybe 20 minutes, he's going to arrive back home and go, oh, there's a dead girl in this glass ball with a kicking dress.
When Superman travels through time, it is shown as being nearly instantaneous, like just a few moments. Especially when we see him in 1977 in the Legion tabloid, which we'll get to in about 110 episodes. So stick around for that one, where it happens between panels and he's having a little, conversation, maybe a 20-second thought conversation of, I wonder what my old friends in the Legion are up to, ... And then all of a sudden he's in the future. So I think that the super speed time travel aspect of it, we can say 15 minutes.
Okay. All right. I'll go with 15 minutes. Even if that means they have to still travel from one solar system to another.
Xanthu may not be in a different solar system.
Maybe not, but still, I found that very interesting.
Well, and it's another example of Superboy just showing off, because Starboy's like, hey, thanks for helping me catch the criminal. I'll take you back in my time ship. And Superboy's like, nah, I'll just make this bubble out of sand and throw Lana in it.
Yeah.
What?
Was it also a weird twist that the exact person that Superboy had as his imaginary girlfriend also happened to be the real-life girlfriend of Starboy, twisting that knife into Lana's gut even more?
Well, coincidence is the watchword of the day in Silver Age comics. Or actually, not just coincidence, but coincidence's big brother, confabulation.
Yeah.
Concatenation. There's a lot of coincidence, but if you start picking at that particular tapestry, I'm afraid the whole Legion may come apart at the seams. Starboy actually at one point refers to himself as the unluckiest Legionnaire.
Why is that?
Because, as you'll know in this earliest story, he gets caught up in Lana's whole thing and goes back to the past and gets all hooked up in it. Eventually, we will find him always being in love with the wrong woman, possibly getting completely ejected from the Legion, thrown out of the team entirely. He may kill a man in self-defense. There may be a lot of bad things that happen. And it was pointed out, and they actually said down the pike, part of the reason that they believe this happens is because he is the 13th recruit to the Legion of Superheroes.
How do we know he's the 13th recruit? Because we have the original 3, then we've got 3 more, and then by the time that we see him here, he would be the 6th, right? There's like
he'd be
7
the
missing Legion.
Member. But this is the thing. These stories can't be taking place in order. So there's the original 3, then there's 3 new kids, plus Superboy,
right?
Plus Supergirl, Brainiac 5, Triplicate Girl, and Phantom Girl.
Well, but those 3 we haven't even met yet.
We haven't met yet, but they joined the team before Starboy, according to the official Legion chronology.
Interesting. So he's the 13th son of a 13th son, or star, if you will.
Star boy.
The adventures of the Silver Age Legion are really weird. Now, we've mentioned before that we are skipping issues where the Legion only appear for a panel or 2, because it has no real relevance when we're looking at the Legion of Superheroes. But these last 2, we have seen a growth in membership. We've seen some interesting powers that these characters have. But we've also seen some, I think, horrible portrayals of young women in comics.
It's not all Saturn Girl being treated as an equal, no. And that is an unfortunate part, of comics in the 1950s and early 1960s. But I think it's also part and parcel of the Superman mythos. And the Legion is very much a Superman kind of agglomeration, an appendix to Superman. And Superman in the 1950s and 60s is based on, I've got to fool Lois, not because it really means anything, but in a lot of ways because I want to keep the upper hand. He's almost capricious and cruel in some ways, in the ways that he messes with Lois. And that does kind of filter down to Lana and some of the portrayals we're seeing in these last couple of issues.
The Legion Clubhouse is a production of Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC, and is produced by Steven Schleicher. Your hosts were Matthew Peterson and Steven Schleicher. You can follow Matthew at Mighty King Cobra and Steven at Major Spoilers. You can follow this podcast on Twitter at Legion Clubhouse. If you have questions or comments, send them to podcast@majorspoilers.com. I'm Jason Inman. Until next time, eat it, Grandpa.
This podcast is copyright 2017 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.